Perfect. So welcome, Johannes. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us at the Art Colony Tribe that is dedicated to air pollution in Serbia and the Balkans and air pollution in general. These are our artists, our distinguished young artists. And I'm very, very happy to have them and to have you. And Johannes will now give you a short intro about his climate journey and his life that is all revolving around the climate, just like mine. Your floor.
Fantastic. All right, let me just start the presentation and ultimately fail. Let me see how this works. No. Here it comes?
Yes. Yes.
Fantastic. All right, so you can hear and see me?
Yeah.
Excellent. So thank you for inviting me. Beautiful people sitting in the Serbian mountains. I hope you are enjoying your time around. I'm Joe. I'm unfortunately not in any kind of Alps. I'm just in the middle of a plain and not very inspiring landscape called Machfeld, which is in between Vienna and Bratislava. Wesley invited me to give you a little, input. I'll give you some inputs about my life as a climate, however you want to call me, entrepreneur, activist, lecturer, consultant, father. All of this is true at the same time. And since it's all true at the same time, I brought you 5 perspectives, and maybe you find them useful or not. In any cases, I'm trying not to talk too long. I'm looking forward to interaction later on, question and answers. Just to give you maybe a bit of a background of where I come from and where I'm going. So I'm basically a trained. I studied business and politics, basically, and I started my professional path as an emissions trader. That means I was trading carbon rights, pollution rights, basically, in maybe your language, which I found super stupid. I moved on to work for WWF, which is an international NGO. I became a climate expert there. I had an insight into a lot of things back in the days that only now, 10, 15 years later, become reality. So that felt a bit like, if you know the story of Cassandra, who always knows what is going to happen, but no one believes her. Sometimes it feels like being Cassandra, if you know how things will eventually become, and there's a lot of skepticism. So this is kind of part of my journey. I then decided, because I became a father 2 times, and that's been possibly the best things in my life so far. I decided to become self-employed. I wanted to manage my time more actively, and I started a consultancy. So I'll also give you an insight from my consultant's perspective later on. So I'm always consulting on the intersection between climate change. That's something that I have a bit of an understanding of, and innovation, which brings me to a European innovation organization which has been scouting climate innovation all over the world and supporting them. Maybe the 2 last things to know about me: I set up a Climate Action Academy. So basically what I've been doing lately quite a lot is going and teaching about the climate crisis, if it's real or not, what it means for all kinds of organizations, what you can do, what you must not do in the future, how you can use innovation to deal with it, to cope with it, and how to communicate about it. Ultimately, I think that brought me here because it reads Klimaschutz Akademie with Johannes Naimer Stach. And if you speak German, Klimaschutz Akademie means Climate Protection Academy. So that is the nice title for today. All right, if I haven't bored you enough, let me move on to the next slide, possibly, because the most important perspective that I want to share with you, and Vessi asked me to bring some pictures, is the perspective of a father. I cannot see your faces. I don't really know if you recognize this picture. I would assume, given your background. So I don't see you nodding. or not? Sorry?
Nodding.
All nodding.
Yeah, yeah.
Excellent. So that is fantastic, because usually the last time I brought this picture was in front of a lot of people working in banks. And when I said that this picture to me perfectly illustrates what we do as a society and what we do as a generation to the generation of our children and children's children, one person had to leave the room because he felt it was too drastic. But as a father, I have to say my kids will possibly live until 2100. That's quite a statistical fact. I'll die around, I don't know, 2070, I hope. My kids are going to live on for more than 40 years, possibly, after I am dead. Then my grandchildren will die around 2150, my great-grandchildren around 2200. That is the time span that I care about. I don't care about 3000, but I do care about the next 170 years, possibly, because there will be people on this earth who I either love or I will love in the future, because I'm planning on living so long so that I get to know all my grandchildren. But basically, what we're doing as a society, and we're doing as people, and also myself am doing, is I'm eating up my kids. Oh no, I'm back. Yeah. So we're eating up basically the future of our kids, the present of our kids and ourselves, right? And we do this like Cronus does when he eats Zeus here in this picture, to avoid the prophecy to become true. And the prophecy in the Greek methodology tells him that he will be eventually dethroned by, so in order to avoid it, he eats all of them but one, right? And then Zeus comes, he hides, he's been hidden by his mother, he comes back and he really dethrones his father. By the way, I see myself every now and then freeze. Can you at least hear me?
We hear you well, but you are freezing a little bit. It's fine. I mean, we hear you perfectly.
Excellent. Then I continue talking unless someone gives me a sign.
Yeah.
So back to this picture. And I mean, eventually you cannot run from prophecy, right? I mean, we have had the warmest summer in history. It is going to be possibly one of the coolest summers we're ever going to experience in our lifetime. We know science tells us, and other sources tell us what is going to happen, and we pretend that we have any ways of doing nothing about it, or we have any ways of preventing this to happen. And I think we ultimately need to stop doing it, which is quite a given. But for this to happen, and that is my perspective as a lecturer, as a person running an academy, you have to tell people, because it's not quite obvious that people do know where science stands. People do also not know where other people stand, or perspectives of, say, organizations who have an insight of how technology can help us, how different forms of innovations can help us. So what I'm doing at Klimaschutz Akademie, at the Climate Action Academy, and what others do who I work with and who I invite to give lectures, is tell people that this is real. It is unfortunate. It is not something that is fun. Usually it feels like you are a dentist. You at least have the same ratings as a dentist if you go out on stage and you tell this is real, and it is us. It is all human induced in the very end. And for the time span of myself up until my grandchildren, it is mainly us who basically cause the problem. And it's bad. There's nothing good around it. It's really bad. So things changing ever faster. So what we have seen in the past is nothing in comparison to what is going to happen. And experts agree. So there's nothing much that you can do about it. You can try, and it's very human to try to argue with experts and others. But in the end, there is only hope if we accept the fact and do something against it, right? And this is basically something that takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of, it is an emotional roller coaster for me, basically every one of us, right? Because we as people, and that's my non-professional perspective, but my perspective of a human person, we go through 5 phases of grief, right? First, we don't want to understand the information that we find is negative. Then we want to negotiate about it. We want to be angry about it. We want to be frustrated. We don't want to deal with it anymore. We become sad. But at one point, and that is the hope, at one point we go through all this process, and in the end, we can, with this new kind of information, design new solutions. And that's the point where there's hope. Because basically, as an activist, and I would also consider myself an activist, and more importantly, many people consider myself an activist, even if I don't want to be one. As an activist, I have to say, well, this is our generation's challenge. Many behave as if it was the problem of their children or children's generation. But basically, and I agree with Mr. Obama in this here, but there's also different politicians and experts and business owners and people from all specters that agree that we are the first generation to feel the effect of climate change or the climate crisis, and we're the last generation who can do something about it. So we must not procrastinate. We must not postpone it. We have to face it. Obviously, there were other generations that would have also known about it. So for the last, I think in the 1960s, the first proof was made that it's humans who cause the planet to warm. But it took some 60, 70 years for this to get to the people out there. And even if you now go into a restaurant, if you go into a cafe and you want to have a very unpleasant conversation, so you start talking about the climate crisis, you will recognize that many people are just not part of that conversation. They are part of different conversations, but the understanding is just not there. And that is critical, because we need all to work together. This is not something that one person, one country, one party, one individual, I don't know, can solve. But basically, and that is my perspective as a consultant, because I am consulting big and small companies, corporates to startups, public organizations to politicians, and so on and so forth. And what I keep saying, and also what the organization that I represent as a general manager in Austria called Climate KIC says, and I totally agree, is we need to work together. We are in a systemic problem, and that means only we together can solve it. There's no golden bullet in such. So there's no such thing like, if only the oil-producing companies stop producing oil, then it's all done. If only we renature, we afforest and reforest our land, then it's done. No, there's so much more to it. We have to get out of our comfort zones. We have to engage with others. We have to find new ways to getting the messages across. And this has to do with innovation. I don't think that innovation always is something new, but innovation can also be something old, something that we had done in the past, but we then went on a different track, and we now understand that we must do it like we would have done a decade or a century ago. So innovation can be quite everything that solves a given problem. So I'm super happy also to be here, totally outside my comfort zone, speaking English, which is not my mother tongue, as you can hear, with people that I might have never met on the street, with talents that I don't have. So I'm not artistic at all. But I can at least try to inspire you a bit, or give you something that inspires me. And that's my last perspective as a human. So in order to solve that problem, in order to really get to stop the climate crisis, the climate change to continue, there are so many options that we have. And these are not options that are in some kind of ivory tower. These are not options where there needs to be a gazillion of scientists working day and night for the next decades to understand what would fix the problem. There are so many solutions already out there. So one of the most prominent example possibly is called Project Drawdown. And what I like about it is that it's very colorful. So usually if you think of climate activists or climate scientists, they are not colorful, right? They are also not very inspiring, to be frank and honest. They talk a lot about facts, but little about inspiration. But this here speaks to me because it's colorful, and it shows pictures of how a future could look like, or how a solution could look like, that really helps us not only stop things getting worse, but actively making things better. And I think that is something that we also don't really have in our discourse, that we don't usually have in a given conversation about the climate crisis, that there are ways to make the future brighter, not less bad, but actually brighter. And it comes with combining solutions like these, right? I think for some given reason, I picked some pictures here on the bottom. It has to do with indigenous people's rights, for instance. Nobody would think of this in the first place. It has to do with techniques like geothermal power or onshore wind turbines being employed on a massive scale, shifting to a more plant-rich diet, for instance, or the restoration of all kinds of forests, just to name a few. Education is an element, better education. So there's so many things that we can do, and so many things that we already know. That is something that gives me hope. And every time I feel very hopeless, and I feel very hopeless because that comes with my profession, then at one point I think of taking a look at this poster and saying to myself, well, everything is not yet lost, even though we are massively behind what we should do. But there's ways to stop and make things better, because ultimately I think that's what we care about, having a brighter, healthier, a better future for ourselves and our kids. Not postpone it, but start now. And that's basically also the end of my little story. There's so much more that I could or would tell you, but I'm afraid I'd bore you after the lunch break. So thank you for staying awake. And I'm really looking forward now to hearing your thoughts and exchanging possibly. So thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you so much. So if you have any questions, or eu preciso iniciar que se calhar vou daqui da primeira, por favor.
Mislim, samo možda konstatacije u smislu da smo to pomenuli par puta kao problem sistemsko rješenje, kako promijeniti sistem ako sistem ne želi ispraviti.
No, because we had some also different presentations and different lectures, and somehow everything always comes down to the system. So what Snezhana is asking is, so how do we change the system if the system doesn't want to be changed? Like if the system is refusing to change, which is a very good question, actually.
No, absolutely, yes. So in the first place, I do think the system wants to be changed. I do think we have reached a point, at least from what I perceive, we have reached a point where there is enough people who understand that the way things are done currently is not how we can go forward. It is just that in many times they are not connected. I give you an example. WHO, when this organization that promotes health basically, and is a UN body. A couple of years ago, I was in a conference. Sorry.
Oh. No, I just was checking it with WHO. Yeah.
So a couple of years ago, I sat in a conference room, and Greta Thunberg was speaking there. Very, very interesting experience, by the way. But the more important input came from a vice director of WHO. And she went on stage and she said, guys, from the climate bubble. And it was a very big conference, broadcast globally, lots of prime ministers, everyone there, right? So she went on stage and she said, do you guys from the climate bubble know that WHO and the climate scientists want basically the same thing? But I never see you guys from the climate bubble in my conferences. Because in my conferences, everybody wears white. And no one was wearing white there, so we were no doctors, right? But she said, you don't go to our conferences, and usually the people from the health system, they don't go to the climate conferences. And then she had kind of a paper of the 10 points that WHO wants to reach in the world. And one is, and then she said, listen, so we at WHO, we want air pollution to stop, and you want greenhouse gases to stop. In most aspects, that is one of the same things, right? It's mainly based on fossil fuels, but you just call it differently. And we in WHO, we want people to move more actively. And you say that people sitting in cars all day and using the system and driving fossil fuels, you want this to stop. So basically, we want the same thing. People have to move more and be healthier more, right? And she went on through this list of the 10 most important points of WHO. And to me, it was really striking because I was like, oh, hell yes, it is just a question of language. It is not so much a question of wanting something different. So obviously, a system is something that is very hard to move. But I think when I started 15 years ago, when I went on stage and I was afraid to be physically hurt when I said things like I say now, in the last 15 years, things changed. And there's many, many more people and many, many more representative of the system, whatever that is, who agree either in private or on public, in the public sphere, that things need to change. I think it's currently more a question of how to do it than if we want to do it. And the problem is we don't have so much time to convince each and everyone and to find ways. And that is the thing that I wanted to tell in one of the slides before. We need to work together. If everyone just goes on his or her path, does not look right, does not look left, does his or her projects one after the other, we might not go nowhere, even if we come with the best intention. We really have to work together, share our intelligence, share our knowledge, reach out to different bubbles. And then I think we do have a chance, because usually it takes a critical mass, and a critical mass, that is not many people, that is not many organizations. It just needs to be organized and kind of brought together, and they need to communicate with one another and know that there's other segments of the system who also want kind of the same change to happen.
Yeah.
Ja sam htjela da kažem, kad to tako posmatramo, to je baš na širokom nivou i može da se počinje od jako sitnih stvari. Evo, na primjer, mi kad smo bili mali, plastike nije bilo toliko koliko ima sad. Ali to je baš širok pojam, zato što ljudi su navikli brzo da žive, prave nam takav stil života da ti stalno žuriš, juriš i sve, gledaju da je što veća potrošnja i da se brže, jel, da je bolji transport, niko više ne nosi staklene flaše jer teške su, i onda na taj način mora da se utiče baš na svu populaciju, ne možemo sad svuda bi trebali da zabranimo i plastiku, a to je baš široko, ljudi koji imaju novac i koji to drže neće to da rade zato što manje zarađuju na taj način. I onda oni na taj način sve se sa tim pomera. Skoro sam vidjela negde kao propagiraju...
Zavisi kako ko ima svest.
Pazi, pa zato mora da se menjaju ljudi. Ne samo, mora da se promeni ljudi koji su na vlasti, na tim koji drže sve te firme.
I will translate simultaneously so that we don't lose it. Because what she was saying is that now she remembers the time when we were younger and there was not so much plastic in everywhere, in the shops and just everywhere. It was glass bottles and everything was less packaged than now. And now, because when you go shopping or when you buy anything, there is just so much packaging, there is so much plastics. And what she's saying, that she thinks there is an issue with the whole governance, and that it's also the governance that needs to change. Like the people on top that will lose money if we now stop plastics. Because they don't want to lose money because it's they are thinking about what is happening now, like when they're making money out of plastics. So there is an issue with also like governance and actually like raising the consciousness and awareness of all the people. Yeah.
Da, onda će se menjati.
Then it will change. If we reach a consensus.
Like that guy last night told, everything is going to because of money. Everything is
that money trail can be followed easily.
Everything is because of money.
Eventualno sviđaju mi se firme koje se bave reciklažom, to mi je interesantno. I mislim da bi to trebalo da se uvede ovdje kod nas, da ima mnogo više toga. Eto, to je na neki način neki početak.
Ja ću vam reći posle, to je početak, ali ispričam posle koliko je zapravo to fake.
Stvarno?
Pa kod nas je fake zato što...
Ne samo kod nas, u svetu.
U svetu?
Dobar početak, da.
Ljudi dele, na primjer i mi...
Sorry, it went because it's sorry, but...
No, this sounds to me like you make you have an excellent afternoon, so I mean, please go ahead. I just don't understand it, but I can follow it with sympathy.
Yeah, no, we're just like talking about like, okay, so what's the because Serbia is lacking in this, let's say, recycling. So for example, Christina was mentioning that recycling is a good step forward, and that the companies are doing recycling, and also like artists that are doing recycling and stuff like that. So as we talk, one of my friends is in Niš having an art recycling festival at the same time. Which is great, but on the other hand, recycling is such a small part of the puzzle and a small piece that sometimes like turns for H&M, let's say Atacama Desert, the graveyard of clothes, turned out to be entirely fake. So the H&M, the clothing brand, was promoting for years that you go and recycle, you give them and you get something back. What they did with those clothes, they just shipped it off to Atacama Desert in South America. And it's there, you can see it on Google Maps, like a huge clothing graveyard. It was never recycled. And Greenpeace uncovered it recently because they were putting the geotags on the clothes that they put in H&M to see where it goes. And some even ended in landfills, and it's really, so this is where I see it's a bit fake. Not everything, but... Yeah. Ništa. Reklama, greenwashing, that's marketing.
I opet se dolazimo od toga, sve je oko para. Znači, kao kupujte u H&M-u, oni će reciklirati, oni...
At the end, we come up that it all goes to like marketing and money, because even like what H&M did with their... Yes, please.
I mean, I might jump in on two points that triggered me. Recycling is just the end of the life, right? So usually you have if you follow a circular economy or a circular strategy, you would not want things to be recycled at the very end of the life, but you would want things to be reused. You would want things to be refurbished. So I think that I'm not sure about your backgrounds, but basically what I think is very interesting and fascinating is the question, how do we design better products in the end, right? And honestly, how do we use less to achieve more, right? So it is also a question of, do I really need all that stuff? And can I design things that last longer, that can be repaired better, that can be reused better, that can be powered by renewables, or that are designed to fit more than just one purpose? Because currently we get lots of products that are just a one-purpose thingy, whilst possibly by better design, we could have better products, we could have better services. So if it comes to the point where it can only be recycled because there's no more use with, say, a given garment, a given T-shirt, then we have failed to design T-shirts better. We have failed to design T-shirts so that it can be reused, refurbished, and so on and so forth. So that's what a circular economy expert would probably say at that point. And also, it is something that people need to be aware of in the first place, that you don't do it for your mother, your father, your grandmother, your state, your president, or whatever, but you do it for yourself if you don't want to live in waste, basically. So I think that is for people with your talent, who are artistic, who are creative. There's many more things that you can do if you design better, because 60 to 80% of what a product does bad to the environment is because of bad design. So in the very first place, if you think it through much better, then you end with better products and less consequences. And speaking of money, I think from what is also interesting, and I'm not saying that and I totally agree that governance is key, money flow is key, and so on and so forth. There's no doubt about it, right? And there's many things going wrong, much more things going wrong than are going right. But what I also keep hearing quite a lot on the European level, and also on the level of people and organizations who want to invest money, is that the money is there, but the good organizations, products, ideas, concepts, processes are missing. So that is also very interesting, right? You would think that the money just wants to be reinvested in what is already there and what is bad. But in fact, there's many you might also realize that there's a lot of money waiting out there for organizations and people who want to do something better. But the question is, how do you connect those change makers with the money? And at which price does the money come then if you are a change maker? So there's many more things to have in mind. But basically, through the Green Deal, I mean, I'm not sure if you follow what is going on the EU level, but with this concept of the Green Deal, with this concept of EU taxonomy, and so on and so forth, there are many things now in place that can really help us move. And I think it was unthinkable 5 years ago. And when I spoke to a member of the European Parliament like a year ago or so, he said that possibly in 2018 and 2019, the single most important lobbyist or influence force on the European level was Fridays for Future. And that is interesting, right? You can like it or hate it, I don't mind. But an organization that was just invented 5 years ago by one person and then collected other people was so influential within a very short time that it was maybe the single most efficient and effective lobbyist of change, tells us that also we can have a massive influence on things if we dare. If we don't dare, we don't have an influence. And lastly, that's also what I tell the companies that I consult. It is all about speaking up, right? It is not only about making money and then going to sleep or going to party. It is about doing jobs, whatever your jobs are or our jobs are, but also communicating and telling stories and reaching out to people and trying to convince people for the common cause and the common good. So we always we never leave a company, we never leave a client without saying that it needs to communicate authentically without greenwashing, because that's, I think, and that's the last thing I want to comment on. I think we have an imbalance of communication power. On the one hand, we have scientists and science who need to be very thorough and go through lots and lots of processes to be 100% or 1,000% sure that what they want to say is, from their perspective, correct. And then we have a lot of companies and organizations and political parties and whatsoever who can just invest money for bad advertisements. And nobody checks on advertisements, right? There is no scientific process if you want to go out there and say that oil is green. No one can stop you. And if you have enough money, you can tell it basically to everyone. And if you open the internet, you're flooded with advertisements. So you cannot flee the messages that are out there. Oh, that is fantastic. We have a yellow dog or something. That is funny. Is he coming back?
I think he went to the bathroom.
No, but I think it was at the end anyway, so he didn't miss anything.
I just wanted to go back to touch on the point when you were mentioning the circular economy, and because it ties nicely to the concept to what we are doing here and this multidisciplinarity. and I'm sorry, but I will say it in Serbian. And I know you know, so like reduce, reuse, recycle. So, kad malo smo spominjali cirkularnu ekonomiju i recikliranje, ima jedna kompanija koja se zove Origami za dečju odeću. I to je dizajner, umetnik origamija i umetnik su se spojili zajedno i napravili kompaniju koja je super fantastična, koja pravi garderobu za decu, koja brzo raste, ali ona je tako sklopljena i tako napravljena da ona raste sa decom. I to je fantastično. I to nije se ne reciklira, nego se koristi u žip, pa se koristi. Od tako je dobrih tekstila napravljeno da se sa ne znam koliko pranja ne uništava i ta pegla, kako je to ono peglano da tako stoji, se ne uništava. I onda to deco to bude taman od 1 godine do 5 godine.
Plisirano pod presom.
Pa plisirano, ali nekako sklopljeno to origami, da to raste sa detetom od 1 do 5 godine. I was saying about that company, you know, Origami Me, that a designer and an origami artist and an artist came together and designed clothes that are foldable so that the child fits in 1 year, but also fits in 5 years. So it unfolds and folds, and it's very durable material. And this is the concept of circular economy for me. And this is the concept of multidisciplinarity, of when you have different actors, like artists, and then origami artists, and then fashion designer coming together to produce something brilliant. And then this is already a if not $1 billion company, because it's so successful. And this is the concept of collaboration, this extreme collaboration, which is, I think, that we all try to translate this message, that the only way to save the climate crisis we are in now is this super open-mindedness and super collaboration, and especially like between artists, inside the field, but also outside, and breaching these bubbles of like science is here and an art is here. No, co-creation, collaboration. And this is somehow the answer to, I don't know, what we strive to say. Did I summarize your speech well?
Totally. I think you did it far better than I could ever do. And my Serbian is so bad, so I'm really happy to listen to yours. But I'm super sorry, I cannot communicate in Serbian, so I would love to. But it's far better.
Yeah, but it's 10 years since you promised you come to Niš. So.
That is also very true. Yes. Hold me accountable here.
By Constantine the Great. So.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much, Joe. I think we really enjoyed this conversation. If everyone wants to add something, sorry, I didn't want to cut off anyone. Ako će neko nešto dodati, da prekine. Okay. Yeah, I think we're fine. Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me. Fingers crossed. Really looking forward to reconnecting and coming to Niš eventually. But I would also love to understand see what comes out of your project. So if there's any follow-up debrief activity, please count me in.
Definitely, because their art pieces will be traveling through Serbian cities for the whole pollution season. So from October till June, we have scheduled traveling exhibitions.
Excellent. Cool. Well, fingers crossed. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Bye.
Have a good one. Bye.